Hi, I don't know where or how you found this video, but thank you very much for checking out my channel. This is actually my first time trying out YouTube, so thank you. My name is Adams, and I run Growth, which is an e-commerce growth agency helping brands with paid media and creative strategy slash production. And we work with e-commerce brands doing anywhere between $5 to $10 million annual revenue to figure out, what they need to be doing in order to scale beyond their current point. Today, I want to share with you our master Facebook ads audit template that we use to audit Facebook ad accounts in order to figure out what has been going on historically within the ad account, and also then use that as a base for defining our strategy going forward. We do have one for Google Ads, but I'll be sharing that in another video, so stay tuned for that one. All right, I will jump straight on my laptop now to share that with you, and then I'll put a link to this down below so you can make a copy for yourself. So while I'm sharing the template, I would also expatiate on our thinking behind the template and how you should be using it to also audit your ad accounts as well. Without further ado, let's jump in and I will show you. All right, so here's the template. Like I mentioned, it's a 30-point Facebook ad audit checklist. So it goes through 30 points that we look at every time we're auditing an ad account, and we share this with whoever owns the ad account, whether it's the business owner or whether it's a CMO or somebody who is a stakeholder within the company, and they then use that to figure out how they should be defining their strategy going forward. This is actually the template that we share with our ad buyers anytime they are going through their initial training with us, and they use this to obviously learn about how they should be thinking about Facebook ads. So I'm going to quickly run through this checklist and then put a link down below for people to make a copy of this. All right, so the basics. So these are pretty much just basic stuff that you need to get done before even trying to run ads, right? So you need to figure out that your pixel is installed correctly and it's firing. You also need to figure out your commerce manager, which is pretty much for your product feeds. You need to make sure that those are set up correctly. So we go into the commerce manager instead of Facebook ads to check this. You also need to make sure that your domain verification, auto advanced matching, aggregated event measurement, conversions API, and all of this stuff is completely set up correctly. Because if we are unable to track data correctly, especially since after iOS 14 dropped, it's going to make the work more complicated to do because we're not able to even track basic data, right? So we need to make sure that all of these tools that Facebook came out with, we need to make sure that they are all set up correctly in order to make our lives easier. All right. And then the next step is the account structure. So we want to make sure that depending on what budget or what amount of spend is going through the account, we want to make sure that it's simplified enough to withstand volatility. So for example, if you're spending $10,000 a month on ads, you cannot go ahead and have 10 campaigns, because that would mean that your budget will be spread thin across all of those campaigns. So you need to find a way to compress all of that spend into a maximum of 2 campaigns. So that will probably be a main campaign that has all of your evergreen ads, and another one that's a testing campaign, and maybe another one that's a DPA, right? So that means like a maximum of 3 campaigns for that amount of spend. So you need to make sure that your budget is spent efficiently on the least amount of campaigns as possible. We also need to check whether you're running CBO or ABO inside of that account to figure out, what to be or what needs to be done going forward. So if the account has been running on ABO and it's working fine, continue using ABO. But there are also times where it's worth testing CBO as well. Also going to be looking at if you're using cost caps. So there's also times where lowest cost kills it within an account, where you don't even need to test out any other bidding strategy. But also there are times, depending on the brand's requirements anyway, that you should also be looking at testing out cost caps to figure out how to minimize bad spend, right? And there are also times where cost caps does not work because it will not spend your money, meaning you would not get out of learning, and you won't even see much data for you to even decide with. So it's figure out what the pros and cons are for different bidding strategies. The next step is we want to see how much of your spend is in the learning phase. Sometimes I don't really care about the learning phase, but there are also times where you need to monitor this to figure out what percentage of your spend is in the learning phase, right? And then we also look at your daily budget to ad set number. And this is also part of account simplification. You want to make sure that your budget is not being spread across a lot of ad sets, meaning you would also not get out of learning faster, and which backs up to the main point about account simplification. I've also talked about DPA. We also want to make sure that DPAs are being used so that people who have added to cart and initiated checkout on your website can then get remarketing ads for the exact products that they browsed. So if I go on the website and I search for boots, I would also get ads for boots using DPA on the Facebook or Instagram feed. So this is also always very helpful. And then the 10th point here is sometimes it's useful to set up SKU specific campaigns if you have the budget. All right, because the AOVs for different products are different. So you want to find a way to set up campaigns in a way that it fits different product AOV. So sometimes it makes no sense to have all your products in one campaign because one product is $50 and another one is $500, right? Sometimes it makes sense to break out your campaigns by SKU, depending on the AOV. So that means you put products that have similar AOVs into one campaign, and then do the same for the different AOVs that you have, right? And then we're also looking at your budget mix across the ad account, because there are times where the focus is to drive new customer revenue. So in that case, it usually makes a lot of sense to spend most of the budget on prospecting. However, we do have a baseline that we like to use to monitor this. So most times we like to have 70% of spend going into prospecting, 20% going into re-engagement, and 10% going into remarketing, just so that we can spend most of the budget to bring in new customers into the business. All right. And then there's also times where we shift some budget into existing customers, so that we can get more of those people's testimonials on top of our ads, and then show that to people in prospecting. All right. And then also look at your targeting, right? So we want to make sure that your audiences are broad enough to leverage Facebook's AI. So if you have, for example, an interest audience that has 2 million people inside of it, there's only a small amount of time before that audience will get exhausted, because Facebook can burn through the audience very quickly. So you need to make sure that you're leveraging broad audiences to do this. Now there is a growing strategy that we're currently using for this, which is have completely open targeting, where you're specifying no interests or anything at all. You're literally just specifying your age, gender, and location inside of the audience, and everything else is left wide open. And then we use the creative to do the targeting in this scenario, to make sure that while the audience is large, the creative is developed in such a way that it can speak to people inside of those audiences, however broad they are, right? And then there are also times where, because every other account is different, there are times when leveraging interest tags can actually be useful. So we also look at that. Even though most of the strategy is based on broad audiences, there are also times where it makes sense to also look at interest tags and lookalike tags as well. Also, we're looking at detailed targeting expansion to turn this on, because it still goes back to the idea of broad audiences. Facebook would most of the time still expand outside of your core setup. So it makes sense sometimes to turn this on for Facebook to expand beyond the core targeting that you've set up. All right. And then the next step there is to look at your exclusions. So if you have a prospecting audience set up because you want to make sure that you're driving net new customers inside of that ad set, you want to make sure that you're excluding your existing customers as well, so that you don't keep serving to people who have already bought from you, because it's just effort in futility, for you to keep targeting those people if they've already bought from you, right? So you need to exclude those people completely as well. And then we're also looking at automatic placements to make sure that, that's turned on. And then we look at international targeting, depending on the shipping options that you have, obviously. So we also look at which country or which location makes more sense to start to run ads to, depending on the success for your main location. So if you sell in the US, for example, and you need to then figure out how to expand to places like Canada, the UK, and other parts of the world, we also then set up location-specific campaigns inside of the ad accounts to speak to people in these other countries, and then set up the campaigns in such a way that it's really drilled down into people in that country, right? We also tend to look at this as well very often. And then we look at optimization. So we want to make sure that every campaign is set up to leverage conversions. We're not looking for engagement. We're not looking for traffic. I mean, we want traffic, but we are focusing more on driving conversions inside of their accounts, because whatever you tell Facebook is what it will do. So we want to make sure that every campaign is set up to conversions, which obviously means purchase, because we're talking e-com, right? And then the next thing we look at is the bidding inside of the ad account. So most of the time, depending on the volatility inside of that account, we run pretty much lowest costs. However, there are times where it makes sense to try cost caps and bid caps or target ROAS to try to figure out, what bidding strategy makes more sense at every stage of the funnel, right? And then another thing that we look at is your landing pages. So we found that sometimes running traffic to a PDP, for example, is usually not the best bet, because there are certain products that require a lot of education for people to be, knocked over onto the side of purchase. So you need to figure out a way to develop landing pages that speak to different sets of audiences in a very educational manner, so that you can, leverage that education into helping people decide on what or why they should purchase, So this is something that we also look at very closely. So running traffic, whether to your homepage, or whether to your collection page, or whether to your product page, or whether to a dedicated landing page, right? So we look at this very closely as well. And then we look at profitability inside of that account. So we want to make sure that you're not just using a single account ROAS to determine success. So we want to really figure out at what point you're profitable on each order. So we also have a profit template that I use for this, and I might be sharing that in another video actually. And then we look at your historical CPMs, click-through rate, and AOVs to think about what those have been like and what we could be doing to either reduce or increase this. So obviously we want to be reducing CPMs, and we want to be increasing CTRs and AOV in order to help us get better ROAS for our spend. We also then look at your frequency and your first time impression ratio, in the last 7, 14, and 30 days, and then compare that to CPA. So if we see that frequency is increasing, first time impression ratio is dropping, and that correlates to increasing CPA, we want to then use that to understand that your audiences are running into fatigue, and so you either need to refresh your creative or try new audiences, right? So we do this very closely as well, even with our ad accounts in-house, and even for clients outside of the agency that we do consulting for, or that we just audit their ad accounts. And then we also look at your creative. At this point, in fact, I feel like creative should be at the beginning of this video, but the creative is like always a very key part of the whole ad account. So we look at this very, very closely to make sure that you're serving the right messaging to people on the social feeds carefully. And then we also look at your copy, if that's been tested very carefully. We also look at DCTs to figure out how to test different creatives within one single ad set, right? And then we look at your different ad formats that you're running to make sure that every placement is sized correctly. So want to make sure that you have 1x1s for your square feet, and then you have 9x16 for stories, right? And then we look at your ADA metrics. So ADA is simply audience, awareness, interest, desire, and action. And this is denoted by all of these metrics that you see here. So 3-second video views divided by impressions, which is also called thumbs up ratio. And we also actually built this as a custom metric inside of Facebook. And then we look at your interest metrics, your average watch time. We look at your desire, which is outbound click-through rate. And then we also look at ROAS to know that to figure out which creative is driving the most money for us, and then double down on the ones that have the best metrics, and then make iterations on, different parts of the videos that we could iterate on based on these metrics. And then here is like a breakdown of the ADA audit. So obviously thumbs up ratio is at the top because those people are watching our 3 seconds of our videos, and also then watching more of that, which backs into our average watch time, and then clicking through to the website and then making a purchase. So we look at this very carefully to figure out how our creators are performing and which ones we could be making iterations on. All right, I'm going to be putting a link to this template down below, and I will also make another video going through a live ad account with this checklist for you to get more idea of the thinking behind this checklist, and then use that hopefully for yourself as well. All right, thank you if you're here at this point of the video, please subscribe to my channel, because I'm going to be dropping more videos around Facebook ads, Google ads, and everything e-commerce growth. All right, thank you for staying up to this point, and have a good day. Bye bye.